Hi, everybody. This is Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. And with me today on the SEJ show, I have Nik Ranger of Studio Hawk. Hey, Nick, thanks
Howdy,
for joining
howdy.
us.
Thanks so much for having me. And hello, everyone. And greetings from Melbourne, Australia. It is 5 in the morning. So if I'm a little dusty, that's why.
Yeah, thank you so much. Um, did I schedule this at 5 in the morning on a Saturday?
Oh, you
Amazing.
know, I mean, we're talking about silent migrations today. So I feel like,
It's
rain, hail, or
true.
shine, lack of sleep, a lot of sleep, I can talk about this topic. So yeah.
Hey, it's almost like we're having a site migration because there's no sleep during a site migration, right?
Oh, mate.
Like that's like number one
We're
tip
just
of
white,
site migrations.
we're
Don't
just
plan
white
anything.
knuckling it.
Exactly. Well, Nick, it's a pleasure to have you here today. We've met in the past. We've done some some webinars and stuff in the past, but I really wanted to just have you on the SEJ show because I know that you've done a lot on the site migration side and the overall architecture around site migrations as well.
Mhm.
Site migrations excite me because there's so many different types, and it also gives for some of the larger clients, it gives a chance to get in fixes, right?
Mhm.
That were kind of overshadowed before. But before we get started, how about a little bit about yourself, your background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So I'm the technical lead at Studio Hawk. Also a senior manager there as well. Um, I am the chair of SEO Collective, which is a really cool little group of SEOs who decided, you know what, we're just going to band together and just create like a monthly event, kind of like a meetup, and go and just help out people and make sure that we can let everyone know like what's happening in the news and things like that. And I am also an electric artist and an artist. And
Cool.
so I was saying to Lauren before we got onto this, I also am an owner of a greyhound, and her name is Poppy.
Nice. I love greyhounds; they're the cutest. And you're also the owner of a llama pillow, which we were discussing a little bit in the past too.
I am, which
Yeah,
came with
as
the
am
dog.
I. As am I. See, mine didn't come with a dog. I'm a little bit upset. It didn't go.
I feel like
I ordered it. Didn't come with a dog. It just came in a box. Well, actually, it came like when I got mine. It was just this little tiny plastic ball, and you open it up, and the pillow just inflated. It's pretty amazing how that works.
oh, that's
Um,
really cute.
yeah. So, well, thanks again. Thanks for making the time. It seems like there's a lot going on right now in the world of the internet, in the world of SEO. There's a lot of mergers happening, changes happening. Just saw some new hires at Shopify. So things are pretty crazy right now. Google's rewriting titles left and right, or at least rewriting them more than they used to, or using different methods too. But the one thing we wanted to kind of talk about today was site migrations. And we had just done a webinar last week about migrations at SEJ. So this kind of fits in quite well on that front. But wanted to kind of get an idea from you, like as a whole, like what exactly is a website migration? And then what types of different migrations are there that you've worked in the past or that you're aware of on that front?
Totally. So a website migration like has a lot of different forms. Like they can be changing the URL. So maybe you might have a site that's like got like example.com / like a bunch of numbers, and now you're like, you know what, let's like enforce some kind of structure and have like them with products and categories and things like that. So that's like changing URLs. Or you might be doing a website redesign. So like your website might be like 10 years old, and you're basically just like wanting to fit in a new layout or something like that. You might be merging some content. So you might have like a bunch of different websites that are, all pretty much have a bunch of URLs that all have the same kind of thing, and you're wanting to consolidate it into a leaner
Mhm.
sort of experience. Changing your website architecture or your URL structures, kind of along the same pathways of that. or just like a general upgrade from HTTP to HTTPS, adding a little S in front of that. Switching your domain names, maybe you're changing your domain name from widgets to wadgets, or you might be merging your websites. So you might have wanting to consolidate all of your international SEO from subdomains into subdirectories. So,
Right.
and I think like there's two others, like switching to a new CMS, a super common one, and switching hosting providers.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of CMS changes I've seen happening recently. It also seems like a lot of the consulting that I do, everyone's making a big change right now. So it's kind of nice to be part of the conversation before a migration happens, because I'm sure you've seen this. Sometimes you get an email afterwards saying, "Hey, we just made this change last week. What's going on with our SEO traffic? How come we're losing traffic? How come we're losing this? How come analytics isn't tracking, et cetera, et cetera?" So in your experience,
getting already into the PTSD. Yep,
yes,
we're already here.
Yeah, exactly. I do have nightmares about this. So, do you feel that most migrations typically work? And well, there you go. Do most migrations work that you've worked on in the past or you're aware of?
Well, I guess with a question like that, in SEO, it's always true if the best kind of SEO campaigns are the ones where your team, the client's team, the development team are all in sync with each other. They all understand what's expected, and they all have a clear goal. And there's enough time that is allowed for everything to go through, and we have enough notice. So a rule of thumb, like most things in life, like with great communication comes great results, or at least like results that people are aware of. Because I think when you think about how, like, why do people get angry? It's just like a mismatch of expectations. So if they want to make some changes, if they want to change their URL structure, they've got like their entire blog section that they're wanting to consolidate and get rid of, or they're wanting to build something completely custom and go down that pathway, and not think about the fact that when you're building something custom, everything needs to be configured, and therefore everything needs to be triple checked. Like without those kinds of just like base acknowledgements, then there will be changes. And just letting them know that that's the case, and yeah, whether or not they want to go ahead with that, or get their SEO team to be able to consult with the dev team for a better solution.
So, in your experience, if the teams are not all working together or communicating, or there's not a reasonable timeline, something may be rushed, goals aren't set, et cetera, is that usually detrimental to overall the migration process and then overall performance after the fact?
Oh, well, it really it really just now is like on the SEO to kind of dig deep and just be like, okay, these are the parameters that that exist within this migration. I can either decide to dig deep and do a shit ton of work within a small amount of time, and kind of white knuckle it throughout this whole experience, and kind of grumble a little bit, but explain very, very diplomatically to the client, like, why things take time, and if they want to rush results, that maybe it might not be a perfect handover. But yeah, it can really, really vary. It can really vary. Like maybe like an example would be helpful. So like when websites fail, for example, I had this one website where they were merging 3 international subdomains into one TLD, and it went horribly wrong. When it was 100% one of those things where they didn't really understand the risks involving the migration process. There was, I mean, I think poor planning is kind of like a nice way of saying it. They didn't really do anything to sort of like go through and check with us at all, and there was a complete lack of knowledge by all of those parties involved. So all those communication things, all of the lack of communication and just not a lot of forethought meant that only 10% of the site was redirected.
Oh.
Which honestly, I've been involved in projects where nothing was redirected. There was no sitemap, there was no hreflang, there was missing subdirectories for both the US and the UK in its info architecture. I'm trying to say that.
That's all right.
This morning.
It is 5 a.m. there, so you're good.
Thank you. There was missing metadata. All of it was client-side rendered. There was no schema. There was JavaScript redirects. So the page needed to load before they would be able to render any content. There was IP auto redirects, and some of the text on the page, like the page actually showed that it was a status 200, but the text on the page said that it was a 404.
Oh no.
Now, I think that was one of like those kinds of moments that when they launched it and they're like, okay, so we've lost a lot of traffic and we've lost a lot of keywords. Why? As you can probably appreciate, like when you're looking at a project like that, it's you know, you got to have an action plan. You have to go through, and first and foremost, like looking at a priority list of like how to sort of get out of there. Like at least with that project, we were told that they were going to be doing this project, so naturally we had already done crawls of the site beforehand, so we had like some static lists to be able to refer back to. Otherwise we can use Wayback Machine, but to be honest, sometimes when you already have something, it's so much easier to be able to refer back to something else. And we just had to methodically just go through, and we had compiled lists and lists and lists of things of the developers to do. And I think the thing that you know, people who are listening should be aware of is like, you know, this is a big company. It was not a small fly by night. It was a big company, and who have been in business for a very long time. And one would sort of hope that, you know, their internal teams are, you know, have seen a migration before. It wasn't the case. And also the dev company that they had liaised with was a pretty big, well-known company. And, you know, I'm not going to be naming any names here, but there were some really fundamental things that, you know, I like as like I've gone through my SEO career, like, you know, people should realize that development agencies and or dev teams, you know, they're asked to build something, and they're not asked to make sure that that thing is visible. They're just being told, build the thing and it will, you know, and people will come. They don't think about the roads. They don't think about the infrastructure. They don't think about like all the things that actually makes maybe that building successful. So, you know, that's why it's really, really important to have a good SEO partners to be there in those key moments to say like, hey, this is really, really great, but you're going to build a building underwater. And not only is everything inside it going to drown, but no one will be able to access it. So
I was also joking a little bit when I said like, hey, this is like a site migration. We should clear everything off the calendar and be used to lack of sleep. But that's the truth. Like if there is a site migration, you have to have, first of all, you have to prepare everything beforehand, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a countdown, and then you have to communicate to your team, hey, listen, this site migration is going to happen on so-and-so date. Chances are something's not going to work. So we have to be ready to start crawling as soon as that moves from staging or development to live to production, and then communicate those changes as soon as possible, right? Even if it's on a weekend, even if it's on a late night, something like that, right? So then also to your point, I've heard so many times that developers say something like, oh, it's okay, Google will figure it out. Like there's so much misinformation out there about how Google's so great at figuring out like spammy links. Google's so great at figuring out this. I mean, even though there's a disavow file, they're great at figuring out spammy links, right? Google's so great at figuring out this. They're figuring out that. They can figure out an article that does nothing that lists affiliate links and serve it as being organic content. Like they're not going. That misinformation among the developer community does so much harm when it comes to site launches, migrations, changing, everything else, right? So it's really interesting that you bring that up. And then from a preparation standpoint, like what would you suggest besides, putting together lists and things like that? Is there any kind of testing that you highly suggest pre-migration as well?
Yeah, well, I think when we're talking about pre-migration, first and foremost, get the introduction call really well established with and make sure you're asking some key questions, because that will really prompt them to have to actively think about how this is going to look. So having an idea of when they sort of expect a launch date. I like to ask that right off the gate, just to sort of get a bit of a gauge as to what they think is a reasonable timeline to be able to either completely rebuild or change some things with their site. Gives me a good idea of what I'm gonna how to sort of frame the next questions after that. The next thing is this might sound crazy, but when you're doing a site migration, it is a project. It is like a university project in which you need to make sure that you've got a main contact with the clients, got a main contact with the technical contact within the client's realm. You've got a web developer main contact, and you've got a content main contact, and that sort of says client side, this person will be the project lead. They will be the primary liaise point between them and us and the dev agency, and of course, their technical and content team. And they need to communicate the deadlines and ensure that the key issues are followed up. Mainly because they're the ones that are calling the shots, and most likely they're also the ones with the purse strings. So everything needs to go through them as that primary thing. If they don't have that primary content, primary project lead person within on their client side, then again, that already tells me that they haven't thought about it. They haven't budgeted for any time to be spent on it on their side, and they're just throwing money at it and basically letting someone else decide the success of their business. I mean, that's kind of what it says to me. So just kind of gently reminding them that for this to be successful, you need to have a primary liaise point, because we're going to be wasting our time just on admin, just on following up, checking things, making sure that parties are aware of things. And to be honest, that's not really fair, and that's not what that's sort of what I think an agency should do on behalf of the client. It's kind of on them to make sure that key things aren't missed. But
just the simplicity of having a centralized project manager on for this project, right? Not to repeat myself, but a project manager managing the project is such a simple thing to have, right? And just making sure that there's someone's job to work with all parties involved, to be able to communicate. Because when I hear someone say, hey, we want to get the site launched by the end of August, in my head, that means October. Or we want to get the site launched by February. In my head, that typically means April, because just so used to things being pushed back because those things aren't planned beforehand, right? So the ability to say, hey, look, you're really going to need someone to corral all of these teams together, right? Make sure we're all communicating, make sure like any timeline changes are happening, maybe make sure that we're able to escalate these issues that we're finding with the pre-existing site that you want to address on the next iteration post-migration, to make sure that the migration's clean, right? We're not taking a clean site and migrating to a site full of 404s and 301s. At the same time, we're not taking a site that's full of 301s and 404s and canonicals that Google is ignoring and try to migrate that over as well. It's a great chance to clean things up, to make sure Google picks all of that up at the end of the day.
100%. And I think it's so important to, ask some really, really key questions, at that important juncture, like understanding, like, like what is the goal? Like, what do you want to be able to get out of this migration? And they might, like, I've had clients like look at me and be like, well, obviously, like we want to be able to, have a new look and feel, and we want to be able to have, like, increase our traffic, increase our capability, and just look the part in 2021. Which is, all those are fine, but it's important to get from them in their own words what they want to be able to achieve from this, because if you can take what exactly verbatim of what they've said and kind of either write it down or like mentally remember that, when things are compromised, they're the things you go back on and say, like, well, I completely understand that, but your goal is to make sure that you're growing traffic. And it's my goal to be it's on me to be able to inform you when key decisions are being made that's going to not be able to meet that, because again, like goal, expectation, results, expectations versus reality. Unfortunately, I'm the messenger of what we're sort of anticipating the data to be able to show. And if we don't get that, then that's going to be, really, really challenging.
I like that you bring that up, just from an overall, like, just why are we doing this perspective and accountability, right? So the client's goal is to migrate to a new CMS because that's supposed to, say, perform faster. Everyone was getting ready for Core Web Vitals, right? 3 months ago, 6 months ago, even now. So if they say, hey, yeah, we're going to move over from this e-commerce solution to that e-commerce platform because we understand that it performs better and it performs faster, helps us with shipping, et cetera, et cetera. So in my head, it's like, performs faster. That's a big goal. Okay, well then, how come you're still trying to render this giant Clavio script as the first component of the site once it launches before your largest contentful paint? Like, you have to figure that out, type thing. Why didn't you make this change? And not necessarily going to why, but like, we have to make this change because your goal is to achieve this. Helps communicate and probably up the ladder a lot more, right? Not just your internal director of SEO or SEO manager, but all the way up to the C-suite. So that's really good advice as well. Just a reminder for everyone, today's episode of the Search Engine Journal Show is sponsored by Ahrefs and the Ahrefs Webmaster Tool Suite. I'm going to be getting a little bit deeper into that later, but it is past noon here. It's lunchtime here, Nick. It's 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. there, but I'm also enjoying coffee in my Ahrefs mug. So I'm going to have a sip real quick and talk a little bit about what to do after the launch. So migrations aren't just about preparing for the migration itself, but there's a lot of work to be done post-migration, from my understanding and the migration PTSD that I'm typically dealing with. What are some of the launch and just overall post-migration reviews and follow-ups that you recommend people doing while they're going through that process?
Yeah, 100%. So with pre-migration prep, again, like, this is with the caveat that you've asked all your questions. You've got a good idea of like whether or not they're wanting to change, like the US, they wanting to change the URLs, wanting to change like the titles and meta descriptions, if they plan to get rid of any pages in this migration, and even just asking whether or not there's any technical considerations that we should know before embarking on this. like it's going to be really important, I think, then just to be able to go through and look at what that's going to look like. So looking at the URL structure, like, the metadata, the body content, headings, structured data, looking at the load times, just to kind of get a bit of a base understanding of where things are at. So first and foremost, I always love to do static crawls. Static crawls are always something that with pretty much any client that I ever have, like the first thing I do is like, I'll crawl it, I'll save it, and just, put a date and say, at this point, this is what it looked like from just like a spider crawl and from a sitemap crawl. Just so I've got that information readily available at hand. I think then after that, going through the pre-launch, so making sure that we've got access to Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and that they've got all that verified, and making sure that they've submitted their sitemap, just like really basic sort of stuff. So
or they're submitting the right sitemap and not all the other sitemaps that somehow got generated.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. Like have an index of your sitemaps and don't like individually do one. Like, like whenever I see that in Search Console, I'm just like, oh, that's cute. Making sure that there's good keyword research, with this sort of stuff. Like keyword research is kind of like the foundation of absolutely everything. And some clients will come to us and be like, we want to be able to look at consolidating the metadata, for example. Like I had a client that wanted to migrate, but they wanted to, in the migration process, give us enough time to be able to inform some things with fallback rules, but others with dedicated keyword research, and be able to write all the metadata. This is a massive website, and of course, like I think we got a lot of gray hair from that, but we basically decided, like, okay, with the original structure, we'll keep the structure that they do have, but let's inform like for all their key pages, just better titles, better meta descriptions, like a better heading structure, and just be able to look at the key layout things that they've really missed. Like in their original site, they have a hamburger menu, and every time I see a hamburger menu on a desktop, a little part of me dies. Because it's just like, you have to like click so many times just to be able to even see like your menu options. So let's get rid of those. What is the faster navigation that can be informed with doing this keyword research? Like, well, these are things that your customers are wanting to see from that. So then that's going to now inform like how the faster navigation is going to be laid out. It's going to have like that research behind it. Let's make sure that there are related products, like all these other really great UX options that's just going to help people be able to find products a lot easily, and make sure that there is within the layout an ability to be able to add content on category pages in the above fold, that we can be able to add some good contextual content in there with some internal links that are going to point to the key pages that are there. Because as you know, Loren, and as like a lot of good SEOs out there know, like internal links are incredibly powerful things, and where they're placed on the page does have some importance. So yeah.
Nice. And then, as you're going through that migration, once things go live, do you typically compare that against everything that you put together? How do you judge that? And then how do you push things through to make sure something wasn't missed and communicate that internally, especially if that wasn't necessarily scoped out with the development team? That, especially, when a client is hiring a third-party developer, sometimes they think once the site goes live, that's it, right? It's done.
Oh my
so,
gosh,
so just want to get some ideas or even some war stories from you on that side.
Yeah, well, sometimes like I like to do a pre-launch crawl, and like within the staging site, make sure we're able to crawl that, because sometimes what we're told is definitely not what exists, at least
Yeah.
in the staging environment. In the staging environment is pretty much what is going to be pushed live. So Screen Frog is this really wonderful ability to be able to go through and be able to crawl behind password protection things. And of course, you've got to let people know, because it will click on every single little thing, including the delete button, and touch all the wood. That has not happened to me yet, but it's really good at coming up with that notification. So I just let them know, hey, if I do this crawl, is it going to break anything? And if it
Yep.
does, that was me, but I'm just trying to like actually see what's happened. Going through, being able to crawl that, and assessing like some really really key things, like is has all the content been uploaded to the site? Is there any pages that are in there that we weren't anticipating or are missing? And again, like the pre-launch crawl and the sitemap crawl, the staging site crawl will be able to like be very, very helpful with being able to inform what those differences are. Is there any missing structured data? Is
Or is it
there?
different, right? Did they decide to go from a, I don't know, offer catalog to an item list, and then not bring over things like, well, I guess missing like ratings and reviews, for example, or even a product price? Did they not bring up product price? So it's funny how that, yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like with actually with a YMYL site migration that I'm looking at the moment, they've just stripped all the structured data out, and it's just like, okay, so we want to be able to make sure, like for this one, like we've got our local business schema in here, we've got like our financial services schema here, we've got our person schema, our author schema. I'm probably forgetting some of the other things, but just like those key things to make sure that like those signals are there to be able to relate all this hard work with all the blogs to make sure it's like actually associated with the expert that has written them up. Yeah, I think when we're going to the launch stage, like that's where we go through and be able to monitor like the index status of all those things. Monitor like the sitemap indexation levels. Do we have some mismatches? Monitor like the crawl status and like any crawl errors, HTML improvements or the improvements, like the antonym of that. Monitor the structured data, if there's any errors or anything like that, or like we were saying, like anything that's missing. And look at like the site speed scores and things. Like if they're wanting to actually like bring this out from because they want to make it faster, have a look at the key differences. And my gosh, like just check if it is actually server-side rendered. Monitor the site speed scores for that. Monitor the keyword rankings. Monitor search queries, and some clients that I've done this for. Like I want to also like monitor the log file analysis, like how this is being looked at, because log files are a wonderful thing. They're the thing that will be the most one-to-one with how pages are being perceived by search engines, and you can get some really really great insight from there.
Nice. That's a nice list of things to monitor. Also, I always try to make sure that when a site migration goes live, that the developers do not leave a no index, no follow tag within the code and suddenly take the site out of the. That's happened too many times.
Oh my gosh!
More time, a lot more than it should have. But little things like that as well, right? When something is even during an update, right? It doesn't even have to be a migration, but an update. Sometimes some of that code from staging can be carried over to a live environment, and it can really be detrimental to the overall performance of the site.
100%. Checking the HTTP status is super important. Like say for example, you've done a redirection plan, and like the developer's like, yes, we've implemented it, great, like have a look. It's really important to have a look at all of the different types of all of the different types of URLs. I had a recent migration that happened a few months ago, and like they're like, oh, okay, cool, like, you know, we've done this, and like now we're seeing some like weird stuff you know, happen, like where the canonicals, like the self-referential canonicals, were being ignored. And I'm looking at this in Search Console being like, well, what on earth is going on? Like, you know, this is crazy. And like I went back and I was looking at all the redirects, and I was just like, okay, like, well, that's interesting. So then I like redid the checks, and so we, you know, www, you know, HTTP and HTTPS, non-www, HTTP, HTTPS, and then just looked at all of the URLs with their HTTP status, and I found that, like, you know, the old version of their URL, the redirect plan was there and in place, but for the non-www and the HTTP versions of both of those different types of URLs, all of that was basically, they had like 302s on every single one of those URLs back to the homepage.
Right.
And I like looked at this, and like my like little like light globe in my brain, I think just kind of like burst. Like,
yeah, that happens.
Like burst, and like all the gas inside of it just like went and just destroyed other parts of my brain. But I was just like, well, this is exactly why the canonical has been ignored, because you're basically saying to search engines that, hey, just like we're actually temporarily just like making some changes on these URLs, so redirection them to the homepage. Oh my gosh. Right. And of course, like,
so everything non-secure is redirecting to the homepage. Everything www or non-www is, but the version they had previously is working fine. So you're basically saying, hey, we have 2 different sites or 3 different sites. Yeah. This one's all being redirected temporarily, or maybe I'm issuing a soft 404 across the board. This one's live. And then also you have one thing I've definitely noticed with migration projects that I've worked on is that there's seldom an archive of all of the past instances of migrations or instances of websites, or, hey, maybe 4 years ago, this site went from a custom build to Shopify, and then it was redirected to something else. And then now you're launching in Magento or WooCommerce. Yeah. But we have all of these .html URLs and all of the Shopify collections or product-oriented URLs that were redirected once, but you don't have that information ready, right? We're looking at a site A to B, but what about everything that was redirected previously to site A from old instances? Those are either going to start going through redirect hops, or the redirects even might be shut off, right? So suddenly you have years and years of authority and equity. And I know that we get so many mixed signals on the Google side. Like, apparently a 301 redirect can be set up for a year, and that's fine. But if the 301 redirect has any equity, incoming links, yada, 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 you don't want to shut that off, right? So you can basically shut off an entire history of a site building authority over time through a migration like this. If there's no archaeological redirect plan in place, which I really like doing, because I like going through all of the log files and the Search Console reporting, the excluded reports, right? To see what is redirecting, what might have been 404ing previously, what is getting picked up, and Google's declaring its own canonical and saying, oh, what's this .asp version of the site that I see popping up? Oh, no one seems to know. Okay, let me check out Wayback Machine. Oh, here it is from 2002. So
absolutely,
that happens quite a bit actually on the migration side as well, I've found.
Yeah. And going through and being able to find all of those old iterations of the URLs and basically being able to point that back to the new version of the site, like, some of that stuff, like, that's in legacy, like, they can really, really help. That can really,
Yes.
really help. And I think, again, like it's like sort of assessing like the internal bandwidth of like, how much patience, and, how much work you're going to be able to throw at a project. Like, if the client's goal is to, do a successful migration, you can be able to go through and forensically find everything like within within the given tools that you've got at your disposal. What's the harm in just looking? What's the harm in just like, being able to see just this list and, include that including that in your 3-1 redirect plan? What's the harm?
Yeah. Especially if you can bring a site out of the Google abyss just by instituting some
Yeah.
301 redirects that weren't there or were going through hops, right?
Yeah.
Done that many times. Been like, oh, how come we're not ranking for anything? Oh, well, it looks like 6 years ago you decided to go from this form of URL to another. Those aren't currently redirected. Let's redirect them. Boom. 6-year-old URL, 6-year-old redirect, but that's what got you out, right? Now you're competing. So it's funny how that works at the end of the day. Real quick, I have a word from our sponsors, Nick, and I'm going to read it live. Give you a chance to sip some coffee. Okay. So as a reminder, today's show is brought to you by Ahrefs. So thank you, Ahrefs, for sponsoring the Search Engine Journal show. If you are an SEO, you might want to know about Ahrefs Site Audit, which can help you scan your website for SEO issues, and Ahrefs Site Explorer, which gives you the data on backlinks and keyword rankings that you desperately need. But you may have not known yet that both tools are available now at no cost from Ahrefs, so you can scan, audit, and pull backlink data on your site and the new Ahrefs Webmaster Tools. It's a completely free SEO tool that allows you to analyze your website's SEO performance and helps you identify issues that could be holding you back in your website from getting more search traffic. The cool thing I really like about Ahrefs Webmaster Tools is that you do not even need a credit card to sign up for them. You can just go ahead, sign up to Ahrefs Webmaster Tools, and you're good to go. So I highly recommend that all listeners and viewers take the time to go to ahrefs.com. Again, that's ahrefs.com/AWT to give Ahrefs Webmaster Tools a spin for free. For free, Nick. Pretty awesome, right?
For free.
I know. I'm pretty impressed by the amount of. This is not a sponsored message anymore, but I'm always impressed by the amount of data that Ahrefs and even some other tools give, even with their free or trial versions. It can be groundbreaking. So take the chance to look into it. Speaking of redirects, my favorite Ahrefs tool is your broken inbound links tool. So you can see all of those old pages and all of those old URLs that are linked to from sites like the New York Times or CNN, or maybe even some really great blogs in your niche. And you can see that they're hitting 404s when they go to find your site, which doesn't only redirect link equity, but if you're linked to from all of those major publications, Google's following those links. They expect to see your site. They expect to crawl your site. You're serving them a 404. It's going to kill your crawl budget at the end of the day. The better those inbound links at 404, the worse it is for your overall crawl budget, your overall site experience. So definitely check that out. Check out ahrefs.com/AWT, one of my favorite tools out there as well. Nick, we had talked a little bit about, before you jumped on, about some of your other hobbies outside of SEO. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I hear that you are quite a musician.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I think I've been playing the violin since I was about 6. And yeah, like I decided after I finished with I guess like classical training, that I didn't really want to be in orchestras and like going through and doing like that kind of like solo kind of work. And I thought, like, you know what, I really need to rediscover a bit of a love with music, and maybe take things into more of my own. So I bought like a $50 electric violin from China, and I actually have it next to me here. And this thing has gone to many different countries, has been on many different tours, but I mean, I'm not going to play it because it's very early in the morning, and I think my partner will be like, "What is going on in there?"
Exactly.
But this is
Oh wow,
this
that
is
is
the
cool.
same violin that I bought, or like many years ago. It's like the first electric violin that I bought, and if anyone looks at this like on eBay, it's now like $100, but
so it's doubled in price since then. It's like an NFT.
I mean, you know, $50 to $100, like, you know, it's still like an unbelievably cheap violin, and like you're like my like I guess acoustic violin is like $10,000. So like it's a bit of an index of scale of price, but yeah, this has been with me for so many years, and it is covered in grime and dirt and things like that. But yeah.
You know, is it all carved out beforehand? Because usually when I see an electric violin, sometimes it's just the middle, right? Because sometimes there's no point in having the acoustic component of it. And I see that one's kind of carved out as well.
Yeah, this
So
is
that was refurbished? Was it like a pre-existing that was refurbished?
No, it's just like it's out of tune, but it's just it's completely just out of the box. Like this is how like the
Gotcha.
electric violin came. And the only like modification I've done here is I took it to like my really good friends in Brisbane in Wollongata. They've got I think I'm really kind of kicking myself, but I've forgotten the name of his business. But he like custom makes amps and plugins and tools and things like that for musical instruments. And he modified this violin and is actually drilled inside of here, which is really cheap balsa wood. I think like it is incredibly light. Like this
Yeah, it
thing
looks
is like
like it.
it could like float on water. Probably not,
To fly.
but it's very light for violin. And like you just put in a little custom guitar jack, and that behind me there is like a full pedal board with like all kinds of like guitar pedals and things like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's what I
Very
did for
cool.
like the better part of like 10 years after that. And yeah. And like I'm now like the world of SEO kind of like really demands a lot of my time and attention, so it's kind of like taken over a little bit. But yeah, I still make music and I still do things, and yeah, it's really great, really nice little hobby now.
Are there any parallels behind what you do in the world of SEO and then your background as a musician? Because I know there's actually a lot of musicians in SEO. Like most that I run into, a lot of them play the keyboard actually. So it's one of the first times I've met an electronic violinist. But are there any parallels? I know that music is great for math, but are there any other parallels between the two worlds, or are they completely separate? What have you found?
Well, I think like largely speaking, because I started out like doing engineering, I think it's like the thing that I love about SEO is like it is very much and it's particularly like technical SEO. It's very much a technical operation with a creative element to it, and that's sort of keeps it really fresh, really new. And with music, you can get as geeky as you want. Like you can really get into the granularity of it, and this is why I really like electronic music. Not only has like electronic music really opened up the floodgates of like anyone can be a musician now, and basically just like make and create something that just like sounds good. You don't need to have like that technical experience, but you can get incredibly granular with it. And like I've got friends who never studied music, but just like sit there for hours just trying to find out like the perfect sine wave to make the sounds like sound and feel a particular way. And the things that they create in like within these programs are absolutely incredible. And I think that's really true of SEO. You don't need to get a marketing degree. I mean, I don't have a marketing degree, but if you're
Mhm.
curious and if you're curious, you can basically keep pulling the thread until you find the answer, and that answer will basically show you, like, yes, this is like a good way to be able to do it, but here's all of this information in GitHub. It basically exposes you to the development side of things, and you can keep pulling those threads
Oh yeah.
and keep going through. And that's what I think I really, really appreciate about SEO. Like, it can be exceptionally technical, and that's why, like,
Mhm.
I'm a technical SEO, because I love that side of things. But it can also be exceptionally creative, because none of what we do is successful without being able to communicate it clearly to someone else. And with these kinds of projects and things like that, even like doing redirect plans, like configuring things like for like a web server level, like in your HT access,
Right.
like like whether 301 redirects are being handled by that or by like a CMS plugin. Those are the kinds of questions you can be able to ask. And then maybe you might want to go through and basically check that, like within Google Analytics, check the hostname report and technology network within GA, and be able to find the hostname, as a primary intervention, and see how, if there's any strange domains or subdomains capturing traffic, and whether or not that's included in a redirect plan. Like, all those kinds of things. You can get super technical with this stuff. And it's like, that's the thing that I really, really love, that I think I've taken a lot from music and taken a lot from engineering, and just like my love of science, into this field.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was wondering about that. I agree. I enjoy using both sides of the brain. I think
Mm.
it kind of keeps me sane at the end of the day and balance the ability to use both. And I also think that, like, the ability to think outside of the box, right? Whether it is something like a
Mm.
redirect plan or a migration plan, like, because sometimes it's not all like binary. It's not like this equals that, right? What we're
Oh my
doing,
gosh, no.
this redirect from here should go to there. It's like, well, I have 20 different choices with this new thing, which way this should go. Let me think about it for a while. Let me put the data to the side. Just think about it from a common sense perspective, like what people are looking for from a usability standpoint, and take it from there. Weigh the pros and cons, and then make the final decision accordingly. We only got a couple minutes left, but one thing I wanted to go through with you before we sign off for the day is, how do you evaluate the success of a website migration? So we had talked about, like, identifying the internal goals that were set up as a reason to do it in the first place. How do you really evaluate, and then, to your point, communicate the success? And then how long do you see that typically taking?
Yeah, totally. So I think, like, whenever like we're at that like launch phase, we've checked like the HTTP authentication, we've gone through, and like you said, like, make sure that the robots no index directives, and both meta robots and X robots tags, like, are
Yes.
doing the things that we're hoping for,
And they're not
and check,
conflicting
like,
with each other.
exactly. The robots.txt directives are, sorry, the disallows, don't sort of conflict within each other. They've gone through and been able to now, like, update the DNS records to be able to point them to that new environment. The success now is really just going through and doing that final crawl, of making sure that what was in the staging site is now, like, very much live within the live environment. Because I don't, maybe this is the cynic in me, but I don't trust people when, like, I've gone through all the iterations, and what is now live is live. And if I see like some discrepancies, maybe I'm speaking from experience with the developer being like, cool, well, awesome, we're about to launch. Now I'm going to do all the things that I want, and just put in a whole bunch of things that, anyway, do a crawl. Always really, really important. But I think when we are launching it, things to look out for, we'll check the sitemap, check the redirects, check the robots directives, the new robots.txt against, like, maybe the old robots.txt, check Google Analytics, test those top performing pages, review all the things that you went through with your pre-migration checklist, and for that, once it's launched. And I think, those kinds of things are like maybe like my methodical way of just making sure that we're finally going through, and making sure that Search Console is verified within DNS, submitting. Sorry, I'm going through my mental checks of
That's okay. This is
I'm
great.
sorry
I
if I'm
can't wait to do a recap of this. Yeah.
doing loads and loads of lists, but submitting the sitemap to Search Console and Bing Webmaster Tools. If there is a change of address, use the change of address feature in Search Console and within Bing Webmaster Tools. Check the JavaScript in JavaScript for using the search and fetch and render feature. I have to say this just because it was mentioned on a Google Webmaster Hangout, but try and just keep the old site live for 12 months, as a minimum. It's good to be able to have that nice there and hosted, and just be able to have that just humming in the background. It's good to be able to do that. So you can get control and be able to monitor the renewal of maybe an old domain. You don't necessarily want that to expire, and decide how you want to bring this into your system, whether or not you maintain the old server hosting and redirects and renew the security certificate there. If it was HTTPS, or forward the domain and maintain the redirects in your current infrastructure and use a multi-domain SAN certificate. Even if it expires, Google seems to follow those redirects, but users will get a nice little warning message.
Nice.
And of course, monitor the traffic, monitor the keywords, because that's sort of the last point of iteration with search engines is to passing through the content and being able to say oh, there is an update here, this is different, but this is still I've seen some nice familiarity. Maybe the URL hasn't changed too much, or maybe the metadata is all the same, the content's the same. It will just go through that passing and that checking again. But to the credits of all the signals, still maintaining hopefully its link equity, that hasn't taken too much of a hit, or if none at all. So there are those final things to be able to go through and check. Once you know that you've dotted your I's, you've crossed your T's, and you can be able to just to breathe a little bit of relief. And one final thing, I always want to just do one final speed test, because maybe someone that's a goal, but how something exists in the staging site to how it exists live. There's a whole bunch of scripts now that users are going through, passing and seeing. It's kind of like someone trucks now going over a bridge, actually having load bearing structures. Now they need to be able to support that bridge and support that amount of traffic, if that's a good analogy to be able to use.
It is actually. I haven't thought of it that way. That is very good. Very good.
Yeah. So yeah, just make sure that it can basically just subsist within the amount of traffic, so that you don't get 5 just doesn't start to throw up 503 errors and things like that, because the server's there are a lot of people who use the site, and our
too much.
Our hosting provider just does not provide enough resources for that. So yeah,
it's true.
Nice little final check.
It's been amazing to pick your brain for the past hour. You're a wealth of information on this topic. I want to reach back out to you in the future about maybe doing a follow-up or something like that, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today on the SEJ show. It's great to talk to you again. I think it's been about a year. I think last time we talked was right before lockdown or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
I can't believe it's almost 2022. So it's really been a pleasure. I dropped your Twitter handle in here, so if anyone wants to follow Nik online, her Twitter handle is @Nik Ranger SEO, as we see right over there. And again, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to check out some of your electronic violin stuff and things like that.
Yeah.
And then also any presentations or other interviews, we'll go ahead and drop in the wrap up as well. Nik, again, it's really been a pleasure. Thanks so much for making time on your early Saturday morning to join us on the SEJ show, and really appreciate it.
Oh, mate, I am caffeinated. I am pumped. And to be honest, like, I think the thing that makes these kinds of things easy is just because I really enjoy my job. I really enjoy what I do. And I work with a really, really great team of people at Studio Hawk, and they just make the days very bearable. So
there you go.
Thank you so much for having me on the Search Engine Journal show. And guys, I know this has been streamed to YouTube, so make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. And if you really liked the things that I shared here today, pop them a like, because that really helps the algorithm just basically, put this stuff to the top and, provide some success for Loren and the team. So thanks so much, guys.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that reminder on the YouTube side. And thanks again to the team at Ahrefs for sponsoring today's show. Slam that like button, ring that bell. We're good to go. Can't wait. Nik, enjoy the rest of your morning. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone who tuned in live, and thank you to all of our listeners. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.